Tonight on Toonheads.
If you watched Cartoon Network back in the day, there's a chance you came across one of the many anthology programs that would air frequently on the channel. These were essentially cartoon compilations that showed both old and new content, all condensed into a themed show, and included some familiar faces, like The Moxie Show, World Premiere Tunes, and even JBVO. While many of these series were rather short-lived at the time, there was one that ran for far longer than any of the others, being on the air for over a decade. But despite that, it's a show that doesn't get brought up very often nowadays, and was pretty buried until only a few years ago. This is none other than Toonheads, a series dedicated to showcasing classic Hanna-Barbera, MGM, and Warner Brothers cartoons all under one roof. The series is notable not only for the extensive library of cartoons it had access to, but for the fact that it was more than a show for reruns. Each episode was centered around a certain theme, and the characters that were shown would reflect that, including the history surrounding its creation, information about the piece and its creators, as well as trivia and other pieces of knowledge most people probably didn't know before. I certainly found myself becoming addicted to the show as I watched more of its episodes online. But for a series with a run as long as Toonheads, it might not be a surprise to discover that many of its episodes are missing, which is only the first step into the Toonheads lost media rabbit hole. In total, 8 seasons of the series were produced, and while the majority of episodes from the late 1990s have been recovered, only about half of the episodes from the 2000s have been found, and nearly all of its episodes from the early 1990s remain lost. Even though it had been airing on the channel since 1992, and even though the show ended in 2003, it continued to air reruns on Boomerang and Adult Swim until 2005. But for a series with a run as long as Toonheads, I don't remember catching it on Cartoon Network as a kid. In fact, I probably wouldn't have even known about the show at all if it wasn't for another piece of lost media connected to it. In addition to the usual 30-minute runtime that most episodes of Toonheads would take, they did a few hour-long specials that covered cartoons with particularly notable themes, including the wartime cartoons and the lost cartoons. If you've ever heard about Toonheads in passing, it's probably one of these specials that were being discussed. The wartime cartoons focused on cartoons that were made primarily during World War II, and how the characters in them dealt with the political climate at the time. Sometimes, these cartoons were even made for the troops, or the citizens back home, and how they could help with the war effort. It's really a fascinating look at what the world and animation were like at the time, and Toonheads presents it all in an easy-to-understand way. Though it goes without saying that many of these are outdated by today's standards, and were censored even back when the special aired, it's for this reason that makes Toonheads so notable for its dedication to the history of American animation. On a lighter note, The Lost Cartoons is another special that I really enjoyed watching, and one you can easily find with a YouTube search. This one focuses on really rare cartoons from the Warner Brothers vault, and were believed to have not been seen since their original theatrical release. It's the kind of content that companies keep hidden in their vault, and wouldn't be dug out for any other reason than for its own TV network to create a special about them. It included some advertising commercials starring Looney Tunes characters, clips from a 1950s failed pilot called Filbert, and one of my favorites, the employee parody video from Leon Schlesinger's studio. There were even several pieces that were never shown to the public at all, and only made for a specific audience. This is the kind of stuff you'd never be able to find on your own, especially back in the early 2000s when the special first aired. But while these specials are popular with the mainstream cartoon audience, there was a different one that put Toonheads into a more modern light, and is actually how I discovered the series in the first place. This is perhaps one of the biggest pieces of lost media from the series, and it made the rounds in the community a few years ago when a post was made in the Lost Media Wiki forums about a short that one user had seen as a kid but couldn't remember what it was, only calling it Plugman. He stated the short was about a man sitting at a desk who discovered he was plugged into a wall, and when he unplugged himself, the animation ended. It apparently used minimalist animation, and from what the user could recall, it had aired on Cartoon Network in the mid-1990s during an animation showcase of short films done in different styles. Like I said previously, there were a lot of different animation anthology series that Cartoon Network aired back then, so myself and the Lost Media Wiki dug through old anthology series and slowly debunked many of them of being the source of this Plugman short. After a while, we had come up with the best lead, which was a series titled Oh Canada, and showcased Canadian animation. It aired a lot on Teletoon, but not as much on Cartoon Network, so it would make sense for an obscure animation to have been seen on there and never again. We were so confident the short was from Canada, I even contacted the Canadian Film Board and asked them to look through their archives for anything that resembled the animation that was being described. But before they got back to me, I decided to ask one of my friends, Captain Bizarre, who uploads a lot of obscure Cartoon Network content from VHS tapes, what he thought about this mystery, and immediately, he suggested something called A Night of Independent Animation, which he happened to have an ad for. Upon viewing the ad, it was clear this was the special that was the missing link, and clips of Plugman could actually be seen in the ad. Believe it or not, this was something Toonheads had put together. Toonheads was now on everyone's radar, and it didn't take too long to find the original animator, named Aaron Augenblick, who uploaded the short officially known as The Wire shortly after. And over the years, we've actually unearthed every one of the indie animations that originate from this special of Toonheads. However, the one thing we haven't been able to find is the special itself from when it was broadcast on Cartoon Network. It remains completely lost, except for a commercial promoting its airing. It should also be stated that the user in the original thread claimed to recall the special airing all day, but I haven't found any evidence of that, and if it was the case, I would have expected a recording to resurface by now. So you might be thinking, there can't possibly be more Toonheads lost media, especially one that is more elusive than A Night of Independent Animation, but I can confirm there is. Recently, I discovered 2 more Toonheads episodes that are even rarer for the fact that they never even aired on TV, but were scheduled to. You can still find a lot of discussion about these specials on old forums and websites from around the time they were supposed to air, so they definitely made the headlines for their content, even without being shown on TV. The first unaired episode was scheduled to premiere during the final season and was given the title The Worst Cartoons Ever Made. As the name suggests, this special was going to cover what animation historians would consider some of the worst cartoons from the library, though it's not clear what criteria were being used to determine that. Several threads from the anime superhero forums can be found discussing this special, with the earliest post from January 2003, where animation historian and Toonheads writer Jerry Beck confirms the special is one of his upcoming projects. Months later in July, another thread states cartoons from the special were screened over the weekend at Comic-Con and includes a list of what was shown, with commercials that would make the special 2 hours. So there's some debate about whether or not the special would end up being that long or edited for television. But according to an email that was sent to Jerry months prior, it seems as though the special was put on hold for a while and ultimately was never aired. Despite the special never making it to television, Jerry does confirm on his website that the episode was completed in its entirety, so this is really a piece of Toonhead's lost media that could resurface. The Worst Cartoons Ever Made wasn't the only special Jerry wrote, however, and this brings us to the biggest piece of Toonhead's lost media, and one that could have ended up being the most controversial of all its episodes. And even though it didn't air, the fact that it was going to at all led to some controversy and mixed messages from the higher-ups at the time. Similar to the politically incorrect content featured in the wartime cartoons, there are another handful of old cartoons which have received their own distinction over the years. However, unlike the wartime cartoons, which never received a collective ban, 12 Bugs Bunny shorts have been pulled from rotation over the years for the content depicted in them, and became known as the 12 Missing Hairs. Most of the content in these cartoons feature racist stereotypes or imagery that wouldn't be acceptable nowadays, so they largely remain buried and usually only get brought up in discussions about this exact kind of thing. But Cartoon Network had different plans for these cartoons. For nearly a decade prior, Cartoon Network aired an annual marathon on the channel in June called June Bugs, which featured a variety of Bugs Bunny cartoons, and in 2001, they decided to air every Bugs Bunny short ever created in chronological order. It would have been the first time in history for this to take place, but there were concerns over not only the 12 Missing Hairs, but some of the wartime cartoons as well. Their plan was to air the more controversial cartoons late at night when kids wouldn't see them, and also air a disclaimer along with them that these were only being shown for historical purposes. It seemed as if this was going to happen, and they were all scheduled to air, until the higher-ups at Warner Brothers heard about it and pressured Cartoon Network to remove the banned episodes from the lineup to avoid any public controversy. They ended up sneaking one of them in, but the rest were gone, until Toonheads decided to pick up what the marathon left out. Toonheads is no stranger to airing historical content, so to make up for the episodes being pulled from June Bugs, Cartoon Network decided to create a Toonheads special dedicated to the 12 Missing Hairs, and explaining why they were removed from the marathon in the first place. This special was to be no longer than the other Toonheads specials, with a runtime of 1 hour, so only clips of each cartoon would be shown and not the entire animation, as what would have been seen in the marathon. Episode guides state this special was supposed to air sometime in the summer of 2001, but a book citation says the special hadn't aired as late as November 2001, and another thread on the anime superhero forums in December 2001 discusses it even further. While an answer was never given about why the special never aired on TV, it's probably another instance of fearing public controversy, which is ironic because several of them aired on Boomerang years later. Jerry Beck also confirms on his website that the 12 Missing Hairs special was also completed in its entirety, so that's another piece of Toonhead's lost media. This wouldn't be the first time Warner Brothers have changed their minds about re-releasing some of their more controversial cartoons, as in October 2010, Warner Brothers confirmed it would be releasing a separate batch of banned cartoons known as the Censored 11 through the Warner Archives program. It would feature every cartoon completely uncut, restored, and include bonus material, though this was immediately changed when another representative from the company claimed no firm decision had been made about a release, or whether it would be through the Warner Archive at all, or a regular mass-produced DVD. Nothing ever came of this project, and years later in 2016, Jerry Beck confirmed that the transfers had been done, but the release was delayed indefinitely due to declining sales of Looney Tunes. That statement was changed again by Warner Brothers only 2 years later, when the release was confirmed to now be cancelled as a result of changing cultural sensitivities. It should be stated, however, that all of these banned cartoons have been re-released unofficially through budget cartoon collections, and can easily be viewed online without context. So it would actually be very informative to get a historical view about them either through an official DVD collection or Toonheads. Since the show was aired so frequently after its original run, I hope more fans who realize they have recordings of the episodes can archive them. I'm guessing Cartoon Network is the only company who would still have the masters, and even if they choose to not upload the unaired episodes, I would still love to sit down and watch the rest of the series on a streaming service in the best quality possible. This precedent is especially true when you consider a point that was made in the special for Lost Cartoons itself, that states how important film preservation is after the closing scene from The Adventures of the Roadrunner pilot was shown in poor quality. It was supposed to air on TV, but never did, and only released as a theatrical short, which hadn't been seen since its original premiere. There even seems to be some episodes of Toonheads that never made it past the idea phase, according to the anime superhero forums. Apparently these were never produced due to the series cancellation, though I couldn't find a reason on why it ended. But if there is one thing to say about Toonheads, it's that the show definitely had a dedicated fan base, and its creativity is something we've yet to see in another cartoon anthology series. Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. Be sure to check out some of my other Lost Media videos. Thanks for watching, and until next time, Finn.
Watch these and other great cartoons on the Acme Hour, right here on Cartoon Network.